I learned the hard way that hatred doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers with a smile, and by the time you realize it, the damage is already done. I used to think my enemies would be obvious raised voices, direct confrontations, maybe even public humiliation. But life taught me something different. The deepest wounds didn't come from those who shouted in my face. They came from the ones who nodded politely, who laughed with me at dinner, who wore the mask of friendship while quietly sharpening the knife behind my back. Looking back, I can see the patterns clearly. At the time, though, I was blind. I mistook subtle sabotage for bad luck. I confused cold indifference for stress or distraction. I told myself they didn't really mean harm. And every time I excused it, the poison sank deeper. Relationships collapsed. Opportunities slipped away. My peace of mind fractured. And still, I kept asking myself, am I the problem? Am I imagining this? That's the cruelty of hidden hatred. It doesn't strike like a thunderclap. It seeps in like slow poison. By the time you realize you've been targeted, parts of your life are already corroded. But here's the turning point. When I discovered Stoicism, I stopped looking outward for revenge and started looking inward for clarity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that, "The harm others do is only as real as the power you give it in your mind." I had been giving too much power away. I was reacting, doubting, and defending myself against shadows. What I needed was not endless confrontation, but disciplined awareness. That awareness came in the form of 5 signs. 5 quiet, unmistakable moves that reveal when someone carries real hatred for you. Once I learned to see them, my perspective shifted forever. They became survival tools, not just theories. And today, I want to share them with you, not as abstract philosophy, but as scars turned into lessons. Because maybe you felt it too. The colleague who smiles while rearranging the game so you lose. The friend who seems strangely energized by your misfortune. The family member who plants subtle doubts about you in the minds of others. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained without knowing why, I know exactly what that feels like. And that's why I'm telling this story. Not to make you paranoid, but to help you guard your peace. Stoicism teaches us that we can't control the malice in another person's heart, but we can control the access they have to ours. And once you understand these 5 signs, you'll never look at hidden hatred the same way again. So before we begin, let me say this. If you're tired of being drained by hidden enemies, if you're ready to walk the Stoic path with me, then subscribe to True Stoic Way right now. That way, you'll never fight these battles alone, and you'll join a community of people who choose clarity over confusion, peace over poison. I'll be honest with you, once you see these signs, you won't be able to unsee them. You'll recognize them in coworkers, friends, maybe even in family. It can be uncomfortable at first, even painful. But the truth is always kinder than the lie, because the truth allows you to act. And that's where this journey begins. The first sign is one I learned in the most brutal way possible, when someone quietly works against your success. Outwardly, they may look supportive, but behind the scenes, they pull strings to ensure you never rise too high. I didn't understand it at first, but once I did, it changed everything. Sign 1. They work against my success. I still remember the first time I realized someone close to me wasn't just indifferent to my success, they were actively working against it. At that point in my life, I believed the worst battles were out in the open. If someone didn't like me, they'd say it. If they wanted me to fail, they'd try to beat me directly. But that's not how true hatred works. True hatred hides. It sabotages. And the cruelest part is, it often wears the disguise of support. There was a colleague I trusted, let's call him Daniel. On the surface, he seemed helpful. He'd smile in meetings, nod when I presented ideas, even compliment me in front of others. But behind that mask, he was pulling strings I couldn't see. Once, before a critical meeting, he forgot to forward me a key email with updated figures. Everyone else had it. I didn't. I walked into that room unprepared, looking careless in front of the very people whose trust I had worked so hard to earn. He apologized, of course. He always apologized. It must have slipped through the cracks, but then it happened again and again. Different circumstances, same result. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't organized enough. Maybe I relied too much on him. Maybe I just wasn't cut out for the position. That's how subtle sabotage works. It convinces you that you are the problem. But over time, the pattern revealed itself. Forgotten emails, meetings I wasn't invited to, projects mysteriously reassigned, compliments in public, but whispered doubts in private. And the most painful part wasn't just the sabotage itself. It was realizing how much of my energy I had wasted second-guessing myself instead of seeing the truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The harm others do is only as strong as the power we give it in our minds." For a long time I gave too much power away. Every time I reacted in anger, every time I obsessed over what went wrong, I was feeding the very strategy designed to weaken me. Hatred thrives in chaos. It thrives when you lose your balance. And that's exactly what Daniel wanted, to make me look unstable while he quietly advanced his own agenda. When I finally stepped back and looked with a Stoic lens, I realized something important. I couldn't stop him from trying to sabotage me, but I could stop him from winning in my mind. I started to observe instead of react. I kept records of emails, notes of conversations, and timelines of projects. I stopped sharing sensitive ideas with him, no matter how friendly he appeared. And most importantly, I focused on creating results so visible, so undeniable, that no whisper could erase them. That shift was liberating. Suddenly, his little gains had less impact. He might forget another email, but I already had a copy. He might hint at my stress to others, but my results spoke louder. Instead of storming into his office demanding explanations, which would have played right into his hands, I chose quiet strategy. I limited his influence without ever needing a dramatic confrontation. And here's what I want you to understand. If you've ever faced someone like this, you are not alone. The people who undermine us aren't always enemies from afar. Sometimes they sit across the table at dinner, or they call themselves friends, or they wear the same company badge as us. They smile when we speak but move silently to dim our light when we're not looking. The Stoic response is not paranoia, it's awareness. Not rage, but clarity. You don't have to waste years trying to make them like you, or to win back their respect. That is not your job. Your job is to preserve your integrity, guard your peace, and build results that no whisper campaign can erase. If you've ever lived through this kind of hidden sabotage, I want you to do something right now. Drop a comment below and write, "I protect my peace." Because by saying it out loud, you claim back the ground that subtle enemies try to steal. And if you're ready to go deeper into this journey with me, make sure you subscribe to True Stoic Way, because here, we're building a community of people who won't be blindsided by hidden daggers anymore. The truth is, some people will never clap for you. Some people are happiest when you stumble. And as much as you may want to win them over, that is not the Stoic path. Epictetus reminds us, Our control begins and ends with our own thoughts, our own actions. Trying to change the heart of someone who resents you is like trying to catch the wind with your hands. It will only exhaust you. What you can do, and what I learned to do, is shift your energy away from defending yourself to them and toward living so well that their sabotage becomes irrelevant. When you hold your ground without losing your calm, when you refuse to play their game, you take away the one thing they crave, your emotional reaction. Hatred feeds on the chaos it creates. The Stoic starves it by standing firm in stillness. And as I learned, this is only the first sign. Because hidden enemies don't just sabotage your success. Sometimes they go even further. They don't simply want to see you stumble in private. They take joy when life itself deals you a heavy blow. That's the second sign, and once you've seen it, you'll never forget it. Sign 2. They celebrate my pain. There was a time when I lost something I had worked months for. A promotion that slipped right through my hands. I remember the hollow feeling in my chest, the weight of disappointment pressing down on me. Most people around me offered sympathy. Some sent encouraging words. But one person, someone I had once called a friend, reacted differently. He walked up to me with that well-practiced tone of concern, the kind that drips with sugar but leaves a strange aftertaste. He said the right words. "I'm so sorry you didn't get it. I know how much you wanted this." But as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him. They lit up, just a fraction too much. His body leaned in, not to console me, but as if savoring every detail of my disappointment. His words fell soft, but his energy was electric charged, not with empathy, but with secret delight. That moment stayed with me, not because of what he said, but because of what I felt. A faint smirk trying to hide behind seriousness. A tone of sympathy wrapped too tightly, almost theatrical. I realized he wasn't disappointed for me. He was entertained. My failure had become his private victory. This is how genuine hatred often reveals itself. It doesn't celebrate your wins. It feeds on your losses. A person who cares about you will share your joy, and when you fall, they will help lift you. A person who secretly hates you will do the opposite. They'll brush past your victories with indifference, but the moment life knocks you down, suddenly they have all the time in the world. It shows in subtle ways. When you post about an achievement, they go silent. When you share bad news, they lean in, ask for details, press into the wounds as if gathering stories for their own satisfaction. They might even disguise their curiosity as concern. So what exactly happened? Did they say why they didn't choose you? But the intent isn't to understand or to help. It's to linger in the story of your pain. Over time, this corrodes something vital, your willingness to share. I began to notice myself pulling back, choosing not to tell him or anyone like him when I had something to celebrate. Subconsciously, I registered that joy was met with silence, but pain was met with energy, so I stopped sharing joy. And that is exactly what hidden enemies want, for you to shrink, to dim your light, to stop radiating the very energy that exposes their envy. But here's where Stoicism gave me a shield. Epictetus taught that we cannot control the reactions of others, only the meaning we attach to them. I could not make this man happy for my success, no matter how badly I wanted him to be. What I could do was stop letting his reaction rob me of my joy. His faint smile in the shadow of my disappointment said nothing about me. It revealed everything about him. So I practiced reframing. When I saw that spark in his eyes, I told myself, this is proof of his character, not mine. Instead of rage, I chose clarity. Instead of cutting him off in anger, I simply adjusted the boundaries. I shared less. I guarded my joy. I refused to give him access to the most sacred parts of my emotional life. And by doing that, I regained something more valuable than approval. I regained control. If this resonates with you, if you've ever seen someone's eyes brighten just a little when you were suffering, then hit like right now so YouTube shows this truth to others walking in the dark. Because I promise you, you're not alone in this. Many of us have stood in that same silence, realizing someone we trusted was secretly feasting on our pain. And the more we speak about it, the less power it has. The danger, though, is deeper than a single smirk or an empty word. The real danger is psychological erosion. If you allow yourself to constantly be around people who celebrate your failures, you'll begin to internalize their reactions. You'll stop believing your victories matter. You'll hesitate to open up. You'll begin to live as though your only role is to struggle, because that's the only version of yourself they respond to. That is not living, that is surviving in a cage built by someone else's envy. The Stoic answer is discipline of perception. To remind yourself, as Marcus Aurelius did, that we are disturbed not by things, but by the view we take of them. Their smirk is not your burden. Their delight in your downfall is not your shame. It's a mirror reflecting their emptiness. Once you see it for what it is, you strip it of its sting. But seeing this second sign also prepares you for something far more sinister. Because some people don't stop at celebrating your pain. They don't just watch as life pushes you down. They move to push you further. They don't only smile at your struggle, they quietly build it. They don't just enjoy your isolation. They create it. And that brings me to the third sign. It's the most insidious of all, because it doesn't strike you directly. It works in whispers, weaving doubt in the minds of the very people you rely on. It's the tactic of turning others against you. And once you've lived through that, you'll understand why the Stoics warned us. Protect your mind, or you'll lose not just your peace, but your allies. Sign 3, they turn others against me. The most painful wounds I've ever felt didn't come from an enemy's direct strike. They came from the silence of friends who suddenly looked at me differently, even though I hadn't changed. And it took me years to realize why. Someone had been whispering in their ears. I remember this vividly in one of my past jobs. There was a man, let's call him Mark, who managed to position himself as everyone's confidant. He carried himself with an air of concern, always ready with a sympathetic nod, always asking people if they were doing okay. At first, I admired that. It felt like he was the glue holding our team together. But then something strange began to happen. People I trusted grew distant. Colleagues stopped asking for my input in meetings. Projects that were once mine were quietly reassigned. I couldn't understand it. I hadn't argued with anyone. I hadn't missed deadlines. I hadn't betrayed trust. Yet somehow, I had become the outsider. Only later did I discover what Mark had been doing. He never openly criticized me. He was too clever for that. Instead, he played the role of the caring colleague. In private conversations, he would sigh and say things like, "I just hope he's handling the pressure okay. He's been carrying a lot." To most people, that sounds kind, even compassionate. But underneath, the message was poisonous. Maybe he's not stable. Maybe he can't be trusted to make good decisions. That's what psychologists call triangulation, controlling the flow of information so it always passes through one person, who then shapes it however they choose. And it's one of the oldest, most effective tools of hidden hatred. Because when people hear something from someone they trust, they rarely stop to verify it. The seed is planted, doubt grows silently, and by the time you notice, the relationships you depended on have already shifted. I can't describe how heavy that isolation felt. Walking into a room where people no longer made eye contact the same way, sensing the hesitation in their voices when they addressed me. It was like being erased in slow motion. And that's what makes this tactic so devastating. An open attack gives you a chance to defend yourself, but whispers rob you of that chance. They don't confront you, they dissolve you. The Stoics warned us about this. Seneca once said, "The harm that others do to you is nothing compared to the harm you do to yourself when you believe them." And that was my mistake. For a while, I began to internalize the whispers. Maybe I was too stressed. Maybe I wasn't performing as well as I thought. Maybe they were right. I was giving away my peace to rumors instead of holding fast to what I knew about myself. It took discipline to pull myself out of that spiral. Discipline to remember that clarity is stronger than suspicion. So I stopped guessing what people might think of me. Instead, I chose directness. If a colleague seemed distant, I spoke with them privately. If someone avoided me, I asked a clear question instead of living with assumptions. And you know what? Most of the time, the truth unraveled quickly. They would admit that Mark had made a comment, often framed as concern, and that it had made them wonder. By cutting him out of the middle, I cut off his power. That was the Stoic response I needed. Not paranoia, not chasing down every rumor, but refusing to let someone else narrate my life for me. I learned to anchor myself in what I knew to be true, my character, my work, my intentions. And when doubt arose in the minds of others, I handled it with direct honesty, not defensive anger. Because here's the truth. Some people will weaponize kindness. They will pretend to care while feeding doubt into your relationships. And if you're not careful, you'll end up isolated not because you failed, but because you trusted the wrong voice. If you've ever felt the sting of whispers behind your back, if you've ever watched allies drift away without explanation, share this video because someone else may need the clarity too. And join True Stoic Way, because we guard peace together, not alone. No one should face this kind of quiet sabotage by themselves. I look back now and realize how subtle, how gradual the erosion was. That's what makes it dangerous. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't notice the walls closing in until you're already standing in a smaller, lonelier space. And when you finally trace the cause, you find the smiling face of the one who claimed to be your ally all along. From a Stoic perspective, I understand now that I can't stop someone from whispering. I can't control the stories they spin behind closed doors. But I can control whether those whispers take root in me. I can decide not to believe rumors without proof. I can decide not to live suspicious of everyone because of one manipulator's tactics. I can stay calm, stay clear, and keep direct lines of trust alive with those who matter most. And once you do that, once you reclaim your clarity, something powerful happens. The whispers lose their grip. The middleman loses his role. And the person who wanted to isolate you is left with nothing but their own bitterness. But the story doesn't end here. Because some enemies don't just want to isolate you. They don't just want to weaken your alliances. They want to erase your very identity. They study you, copy you, and then twist your reflection until it looks like theirs. It's hatred mixed with obsession. And once you've experienced it, you'll never forget it. That is the fourth sign. Sign 4. They copy me while trying to outdo me. I once thought imitation was the highest form of flattery. If someone mirrored my work, my style, even my way of speaking, I believed it meant I was doing something worth following. And sometimes that's true. Healthy inspiration exists. We all borrow from each other. We all learn by observing. But there's a darker form of imitation, one that doesn't come from admiration, but from resentment. And when I experienced it firsthand, I realized how dangerous it can be. There was a man I knew, let's call him Adrian. He was in the same field as me, always hovering close, always watching. At first, I thought we shared mutual respect. We exchanged ideas, shared resources, and for a time, I believed we were both helping each other grow. But then something strange happened. My presentation started sounding oddly familiar when he gave his. My ideas reappeared in his reports, with small changes to make them seem original. Even the way I dressed for events, the phrases I used in meetings, the tone I carried, he began to replicate them, piece by piece. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe he just admired my approach. But admiration evolves differently. True inspiration takes a spark and creates something new, something authentic. What Adrian was doing wasn't creation. It was replication, and not just replication, it was competition. Every time he copied me, he positioned himself as doing it better. He'd echo my ideas, then add, "Of course, I took it one step further." He mirrored my style, then hinted that he had refined it. What once felt like camaraderie soon felt like surveillance. And here's where it cut deepest. He accused me of copying him. That's the cruelest trick of this kind of hatred. Not only do they steal, they gaslight. They flip the script so convincingly that others begin to question your originality. Suddenly, you're not the innovator, you're the imitator. I can't explain the frustration of hearing my own work echoed back to me as if it were his invention, while I stood accused of stealing. That's when I remembered a story about Picasso and Georges Braque. For a while, their collaboration pushed both men to new heights. But at some point, Braque's work began to mirror Picasso so closely that the line between them blurred. To the public, it may have looked like shared genius, but Picasso knew the truth. Braque wasn't celebrating him, he was trying to erase him. That's what malicious imitation does. It doesn't build, it replaces. It doesn't honor, it erases the origin. Living through this with Adrian drained me more than I expected. It felt like being trapped in a hall of mirrors where every move I made was shadowed. I caught myself thinking ahead. If I do this, will he copy it? If I wear this, will he wear the same? Before I realized it, I wasn't living freely anymore. I was living in reaction to him. And that's exactly how hidden hatred consumes you. It forces you into the same competition that already eats them alive. The Stoics offered me a way out. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." I realized the antidote to imitation wasn't competing harder. It was letting go of the need to win against them. My life is mine. My value doesn't shrink just because someone else borrows from it. And no matter how close they try to mimic me, they cannot touch the foundation of my character unless I hand it over by reacting. So I chose stillness. I stopped scanning over my shoulder to see if Adrian would copy my next move. I stopped feeding the obsession by proving I was first. I reminded myself that authenticity has a texture no imitation can replicate. True character isn't in the words you use or the clothes you wear. It's in the stillness of knowing who you are when no one is watching. That is something no imitator can ever steal. If you've ever felt the sting of being copied, if you've watched someone twist your originality into their performance, don't let imitators steal your peace. If you agree, comment below. My life is mine. And make sure you're subscribed to True Stoic Way. so you never lose yourself in comparison games. Because here, we remind each other, your worth isn't measured by outshining someone else. It's measured by how deeply you live your truth. The truth is, people who copy you while trying to outdo you are living in chains of envy. Their obsession thrives only if you feed it with attention. When you walk away from the comparison, you suffocate it. And suddenly, you're free again, free to live, free to create, free to breathe in your own skin without glancing sideways. But as heavy as this sign is, it's not the final one. Because there's something even more dangerous than being imitated, even more corrosive than being accused of copying. It's when every interaction with a person, even the smallest conversation, leaves you drained, unsettled, questioning yourself. That's when hatred stops being an external force and begins poisoning you from the inside out. And that is the fifth and final sign. Sign 5, every interaction leaves me drained. There are people who can drain the life out of you without ever raising their voice. No arguments, no shouting, no open conflict, just quiet conversations that somehow leave you walking away heavier than when you arrived. I know this sign well, because I lived it for years without naming it. There was someone in my circle, let's call her Claire. On the surface, she was polite, always ready with a smile, always careful with her words. But every time I spent time with her, I felt a slow erosion inside me. I'd walk away unsettled, anxious, replaying the conversation in my mind, as if trying to find the exact moment something went wrong. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I imagined things. But when it happens repeatedly, in dozens of small, almost invisible ways, you realize it's not your imagination, it's their pattern. I began noticing the details. The backhanded compliments. Your project turned out better than I expected. The subtle digs. Your home is really nice, especially considering the neighborhood. The smirk after a comment that cut just a little too close to my insecurities. None of it could be called mean on its own. But together, they formed a slow, deliberate drip of poison. That's how hidden hatred works at its most dangerous. It doesn't confront you, it corrodes you. Each interaction chips away at your confidence until you begin to doubt not just them, but yourself. I found myself walking on eggshells, choosing my words carefully, avoiding certain topics just to prevent those little stings. And that's when I realized I was no longer free in those interactions. I was performing. Gaslighting made it worse. More than once, she denied ever saying something that clearly stuck with me. Or she twisted my words so the entire conversation flipped. And suddenly, I was the unreasonable one. It left me questioning my memory, my judgment, even my stability. That's the cruelest part. They make you doubt your own mind, which is exactly what Stoicism warns us never to surrender. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Spending time around someone like this slowly stains your mind. You begin to see yourself through their subtle insults, their warped reflections. And before long, you can't tell if the unease is coming from them or if it's who you really are. That's the trap. That's the slow war they wage against your peace. So how do you respond? The Stoic way isn't to demand apologies or confront every slight that would only lock you into their frame. Instead, the practice is recognition. See the pattern for what it is. Understand that if every interaction with someone leaves you feeling smaller, more uncertain, more exhausted, that is not random. That is a signal. Your subconscious is alerting you to something your conscious mind hasn't fully named yet. The next step is boundaries. You don't owe them unlimited access to your mind. You don't have to keep explaining yourself, or trying to win their approval, or proving you're not too sensitive. You can calmly, quietly withdraw your energy. You can limit the conversations. You can refuse to play their game. Because your mind, your peace, is not their playground. When I finally did this, I felt a strange relief. For the first time in years, I walked away from an interaction with Claire and didn't feel drained, because I had chosen not to give her the power to touch my inner state. I smiled, I was polite, but inside, I stayed anchored. Her smirk no longer reached me. Her half-compliments slid off like water on stone. And that's when I realized, hatred can only consume you if you feed it with your reactions. If you've ever walked away from someone and felt your soul heavier, you know this truth. Subscribe now to True Stoic Way so you don't carry it alone. Because there are many of us who know this weight, and together, we're learning how to set it down. Here's the uncomfortable reality. You don't always get undeniable proof. You won't always have a recording of their words or a witness to their smirk, but you don't need it. The effect on your soul is proof enough. If a person consistently drains you, that is reason enough to set boundaries. That realization changed everything for me. I no longer needed to justify my distance. I no longer argued with myself about whether I was too harsh or too sensitive. I understood that my peace was mine to guard, and that was all the justification I needed. And when I finally looked back on all 5 signs, the sabotage, the delight in my pain, the whispers that turned others against me, the imitation that erased my identity, and the draining interactions that corroded my peace, I saw the full picture. Hatred isn't loud, it's patient, it's subtle. It works in silence until it's too late, unless you learn to see it. And now you can. Now that I've walked you through these 5 signs, I want to leave you with a truth I wish I had understood much earlier in my life. Hatred isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks and battle drums. It arrives quietly, patiently, in small gestures, subtle words, polite smiles. It hides in plain sight, waiting for you to overlook it until the damage is already done. I've seen it in sabotage that masquerades as simple mistakes. I've seen it in the faint smiles when life knocks you down. I've felt it in the whispers that rewrote my reputation. I've watched it in the imitation that tried to erase my identity. And I've carried the exhaustion of walking away from conversations where I felt smaller than when I arrived. These aren't just lessons, they are survival tools. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. They are not meant to make you paranoid. They are meant to sharpen your awareness, to guard your peace. Because while hatred may be silent, it is also predictable. And predictability gives you power if you choose to act. The Stoics never promised us that the world would be kind. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, they all lived surrounded by betrayal, envy, and malice. But what they discovered, and what I've had to learn for myself, is that we do not control the hearts of others. We cannot dictate who envies us, who despises us, or who quietly plots against us. What we can control is the access they have to our mind. We can guard the doorway and refuse to hand them the keys. And that's where freedom lives. Not in eliminating every enemy, but in ensuring their hatred never poisons your soul. So if what I've shared today gave you clarity, don't just leave quietly. Hit subscribe to True Stoic Way. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this protection, and drop a comment below. I choose peace over poison. Because when you declare it, you not only reclaim your ground, you give strength to someone else who may be silently fighting the same battle. Remember this. The greatest revenge is not proving them wrong. It's not winning the argument. It's not exposing them in public. The greatest revenge is living so well, so steadily, so peacefully, that their hatred becomes irrelevant. That's what Stoicism has taught me. That's the shield I want you to carry with you. And this is only the beginning. Because while you now know the 5 silent moves of hatred, there are deeper strategies to protect your mind, your energy, and your peace. In the next video, I'll take you to the next layer of Stoic protection, so when envy, anger, and betrayal knock on your door, you'll know exactly how to stand unshaken. Your future self will thank you for not stopping here.